Ball player. Marty Schottenheimer went to the Cal-Stanford game, was sitting in the stands, watched him play. You see his quickness, he change of direction, his body position. You see a lot of things in the basketball game. As far as a tight end, you want somebody who can release and get up the field and run the corner routes deep down the field and then beat two deep coverage down the middle. And he's played in the West Coast offense, so he's ahead in that part of the game, and he's a good pick.
You saw Ricky Dudley, of course, the tight end drafted a couple of years ago out of Ohio State. He also played basketball. Gonzalez, though, much more of a two-sport athlete, a much better basketball player than Dudley was. Now, Jaws, I know Schottenheimer's not concerned with that touch on the baseline jumper or the rebounding ability. How will he use Gonzalez to make his offense?
Well, Marty probably has a good offseason program where they play basketball games, right, so they could probably use him in that regard also. But I spoke to Carl Peterson on Thursday, and he really wanted a tight end, and Tony Gonzalez was the guy that they really targeted. And what not only does he really give you the ability to block, he's a fine blocker, but what really helps the West Coast offense is getting the football down the field. And when you look at the set right here, this will be Tony Gonzalez right here in a tight end situation, nickel passing. And what we're seeing predominant now in the NFL is a man under. All these people are man-to-man with everybody. As you can see, they're all single up, and they split the safeties to cover these areas of the field. And that leaves the middle of the field wide open. Tony Gonzalez has the ability to beat a linebacker all day long and hit this area of the field. This coverage can be beaten. It's a predominant coverage. If you have a tight end like Tony Gonzalez, you can light up the scoreboard with points.
Let's face it, other teams have tried to draft tight ends high. Ricky Dudley, obviously the jury out. Derek Brown, Johnny Mitchell have not been successes, but you think Gonzalez will be?
Oh, absolutely. And Elvis Gervach, who worked with Brent Jones in Kansas City, I mean, excuse me, not in Kansas City, but in San Francisco, is going to love a guy like this. He's a go-to receiver that can get you big yards after the catch.
But after Gonzalez was taken, Raynard Wilson went to Cincinnati. He's part of, I think, Mike, the most dominating pair of bookend pass rushers that I've ever seen in college football, along with Peter Boulware, who went 10 spots higher than Wilson. But you actually like Raynard better, the guy they call Big Country.
And don't forget Andre Wadsworth. He's coming back to Florida State. But I like Raynard Wilson just a little better than Peter Boulware because he's stronger. He's a leveraged player. He has great strength in his hands. He'll maul you. He's a 500-pound bench presser, and he plays the run real well.
And he is a tough, ornery guy. There are a lot of stories. He wrestled an alligator out of a pond behind his mom's house when she was eating the fish in that pond. He's grabbed possums and scared teammates on the Florida State campus. Raynard Wilson, he has earned the name Big Country. He is a big, strong guy. Back to our big guy in New York, Chris Berman.
I don't know if I've wrestled with alligators yet, though, or snatching possums, but Houston and Kansas City played a little possum, and let's clean up that trade for you. So, for Kansas City, moving up 5 spots to get the selection, allow them to pick Tony Gonzalez. The Oilers get a 3 and a 6 out of the deal, and the two teams swap 4 with the Chiefs moving up a tad. But the Oilers get a couple of picks to drop down 5 spots. Now, Cincinnati Bengals, Tom, your hometown. Raynard Wilson, tough player, wrestling with alligators for the Bengals. Is it perfect or what?
For a guy like this, he's a dominant defensive end who you can use as a linebacker type. I think the thing that you notice when you watch Boulware and Wilson is that even though Boulware ran about 0.2 of a second faster, oftentimes they would get it to the point of attack or get to the quarterback at the exact same time. You're talking about a guy who has a little bit longer arms, a guy who gets great leverage at the point of attack. As we take a look at him, he's also a very smart player. You watch him, this is another guy who has excellent technique. He won't get too far upfield where he runs himself out of plays. You'll see him fall back inside, be able to make plays downfield for you. He can also double as a speed rusher because he's quicker than he is faster, but you see his strength right there. The thing that makes him a great player, and coaches always talk about the ability to force a turnover. What makes this guy be able to force a turnover is that when he aims for his spot, when he wants to hit you, he gets his butt up under him, and he aims for a spot behind the guy he's going to tackle. So this is a guy who, for Cincinnati, is going to create a lot of turnovers.
Tommy, I can't believe he didn't take that opportunity to return the favor to Sterling and just slug him there. I don't get it. I guess you guys have been teammates too long, right? Well, Jimmy Johnson on the clock with the Miami Dolphins. We'll take a look at the war room right now. And we've gotten accustomed to this scene as certainly when Jimmy's years, his Super Bowl years with the Dallas Cowboys. And now we brought War Room Cam along with Jimmy and his tropical fish down to the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins were an 8-8 squad last year. His first draft a couple years ago, well, not his first draft, but from 2 years ago, the 95 draft, there are just, what, 1 player left from that draft So he has really changed things over and looks to do a lot of the same, Mel, because as Chris Mortensen mentioned, when we come to the third round, the Dolphins, don't forget, will have 4 picks.
They will, and I think when you look at the best available players right now, you're going to see a lot of quality still on the board. It's good for Miami, good for Tampa Bay, good for Washington, good for Houston. All those teams are positioned to get quality football players. When you look at the best available players, Yatil Green, Jim Druckenmiller. Does he go here? Does he go to the 49ers? Caruth, the speed receiver, Rudd, an outstanding all-around linebacker, Corey Dillon, the power runner, and, of course, Jamie Sharper, a true outside backer. When you look at the rest of the players, Antoine Smith, we know about his capabilities. LaFleur, Wiley, Tarek Glenn, that bookend left tackle, is going to get better, only 20 years of age. Damon Denton, an outstanding pure guard, a former defensive tackle. I think you're looking at a lot of quality, and those teams that move down and those teams still waiting, like the Washington Redskins particularly, are going to see a lot of good defensive players still there.
Well, certainly Jimmy Johnson worked the draft, and that's why the Dallas Cowboys won the 3 Super Bowls, 2 with Jimmy there, and, of course, the 1 with Switzer. He's working the draft now with the Dolphins. Working for us down in Miami is Chris Mortensen. And I guess Jimmy really had about 3 or 4 or 5 ways he could go, but several of the players that he was looking at are already gone, right, Morton?
Well, no, I think he had 3 or 4 that were still there. I think Renard Wilson certainly would have been a guy he would have considered. But, you know, to me, Jimmy always looks for value here, and he could trade out. He's been on the phone, but there's a playmaker on the board, and he was at the top of Mel's list there. Yatil Green, University of Miami. Some think he could be another Michael Irvin, and Jimmy knows what type of success he's had there. But certainly, Jimmy, I think, is going to be pleased because he felt this draft was going to fall his way at this 15 spot. Chris?
Well, I find it interesting they're looking at the map there. I don't know if they're going to look for a player in Utah or that was Arizona, New Mexico. I don't know, maybe that's a clue. We're looking for clues at this point.
Well, what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out where they're going to ship somebody.
Right.
I mean, when you look at Jimmy, and it was mentioned earlier, Jimmy likes to control the draft. He controls it with picks. And what he's doing is he's built the Miami Dolphins basically with 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks. The first round to him is not necessarily one where he can get quote-unquote value. He may get a good player, but he needs somebody to come in and play for him. He's made it clear to a lot of people. You come in, you work hard for me, you're going to play. We saw it with Zach Thomas last year. You don't have to be drafted high. All you have to do is show me you can get the job done. Again, this is sort of one of those situations where you hear the name Yatil Green again. Down in Miami, it works for him if it's a possibility.
Well, Jimmy on the phone. You saw Bob Ackles in the shot a moment ago. The Dolphins have about 5 minutes to make their pick. We'll be back.
In the tradition of Pride and Prejudice.
You risked everything for me.
Between love and duty. What now?
You told me she was dead.
Tell me I do not excite you. Treachery and honor. One night stands alone. The A&E original presentation, Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe, begins Sunday, April 20th at 8 Eastern, 9 Pacific on A&E.
Chivalry and romance live here on A&E and Cox Cable.
Last year began like any other. But as the season began to develop, it became clear that changes were happening. The blending of talent, determination, and vision created a new direction. Come see for yourself. The 1997 Arizona Cardinals. Feel the power.
Back in New York, the Dolphins have made their selection.
Could be dinner.
Well, we're going to give the commissioner another shot at it because it's certainly not his fault. We have what we call technical difficulties. We have our best men on it.
Change. All I do is change.
This is why we have backup mics.
Who do you think it's going to be, Chris?
This is why you need good backups for the entire season.
I told you that. That's why I talked about those veterans.
And maybe they're already negotiating the deal. Bob Ackles, Jimmy Johnson on the phone. It's very exciting. It's the most exciting microphone change that we've ever had here at the draft.
The 15th pick in the first round, Miami Dolphins select Yatil Green, wide receiver from the University of Miami.
Well, they don't have to pay moving expenses. That's one thing they don't have
we're
to
looking
do.
at the bat.